I really kind of don't know all this, so I'm not interested in being portrayed as an expert. But for the sake of just sharing information that I have heard with you, in the late 70s, the Marbot family sold this ranch, and it includes quite a bit of land. This land that we're on here, and those hills up to the tops of those hills, and then land farther north towards Snowbowl, and in fact land across the road. So they wanted to see that the elk, which had been using this area, which were then, as I understand it, about 3 dozen to 4 dozen elk, didn't lose their home when the subdivision occurred. And they gave land to the National Wildlife Federation, which has managed it since then on behalf of the elk, and I believe that's about 700 acres. And as I understand it, there were also some conservation easements granted about the same time, which includes another 2,000 acres of land in this drainage that will not be developed and that is available for the elk. The elk herd has done remarkably well. It's now not a few dozen, but about 300. And it grows 17% every year. And I think this is due totally to a variety of other things that have happened, which has prevented the elk herd from being essentially hunted. So it's an unhunted elk herd that spends the summers up in the Rattlesnake and retreats down here once hunting season starts to various private lands where there's no hunting. And they can move at night from one sanctuary to another, and they get through the whole hunting season essentially with no hunting. And the ranchers who own the lands on the hills above there are pretty unhappy with the size of this herd and the impact it's having on their grass. And so last winter there was elk damage hunt on those hills. And there's a concern about the size of the herd and the impact it's having on folks who have the remaining open land. And I have the interest of seeing that that land continues to remain open. And so I would much prefer, for instance, to see management taken that enables those ranchers to be comfortable ranching than to see a situation where they feel they're economically unable to ranch and continue development of subdivisions so that the elk have fewer and fewer places to be.
You mentioned Washington Corporation owns land back here too?
Well, the way I understand it, Dennis Washington owned much of what the Marbots sold. He ended up with much of what the Marbots sold. And this subdivision was developed by some of Dennis Washington's holdings, as I understand, which is why it's called Prospect, and there was Klondike and Galena and all that. And as I understand it, he has a ranch just to the north of here, the former Grant Creek Ranch is his. And as I understand it.
I think I've heard that too.
And again, I'm no expert. I'm just telling you what I've heard.
Did you also hear that he has some under conservation easement?
I understand that there's 1,200 acres of land on his ranch that is in the conservation easement that was established about 25 years ago.
And what did you mention about the bird sanctuary? That was part of the Marbot family's.
That's my understanding. That's my understanding. And that it was done in memory of a family member, again, as I understand it.
And I was told that that's the National Wildlife Federation now owns that land as well as the elk land.
And that may be. I just really don't know.
Yeah, I think my students got on the land ownership.
Oh, great!
Well, GIS system, and
that I would believe.
They were kind of surprised, and they said, "Wow, the bird sanctuary belongs to the National Wildlife Federation."
So, would you like to return to the van or see more of what this looks like? It's going to look a lot like this everywhere we go.
And about how many acres does the home?
Well, the homeowners association owns I'm thinking about 3/4 of a mile of this bottom land along the creek, and we control, I believe, something in the range of 150 acres of community land, some of which is the grasslands you see above there.
How far up the hills?
Well, we control largely partway up to the top or to the top of those ridges. And the homes end below there, and there's a fence along there. Mike Flynn is the rancher who adjoins, And so up to his fence, we control. And so one of the challenges we face is controlling weeds, which is something that one of our association members, Janelle Queen, has taken a pretty strong interest in, and with the county's help, we've done a lot of work. So we're struggling to try and keep weeds under control, and that affects the quality of the habitat here as well. They don't spend a lot of time on our ground. They spend a lot of time on Mike Flynn's ground and some of the other ranchers up there, and on Dennis Washington's ranch.
The university people probably know Lloyd Queen, the forestry professor, and Janelle Queen's his wife.
That's correct.
The ranching practices is just grazing. I mean, they're not actually doing any hay or anything like that up above, are they?
As far as I know, this is grazing. And it may be hay down the bottom along Grant Creek. I think this was established when the subdivision went in and the homeowners association ended up with it. Unless I'm mistaken, it was a decision made by whomever held the land that we're going to put houses here, and this is going to be open space, and the homeowners association ends up managing what it inherits.
Might have been required by the floodplain administrator or the county or something of that sort. It was part of
I'm sure that it would be very challenging to get a permit to build a home right here. And so if you're a developer and you can set aside lands for parks and so forth, certainly this is a tremendous asset to the wildlife in the Missoula area, and it's a tremendous asset to the homeowners who enjoy this when they hike along.
Now, there's not another dike, or
there's no diking up here to the best of my
so
knowledge.
this is all natural as you go this way, the topography.
I hesitate to use the word natural. It's minimally altered. There is.
I'm just talking about the topography.
Well, there is a drainage basin farther up. If we were to go up, you would see a drainage basin where stormwater from the subdivision drains into a bermed pond, and that is in this low area. It's probably too far for the creek to flood regularly.
Downstream of that bridge, we're going to see a big berm that was put in. There's not anything like that.
There's no berms that I know of in this 3/4 mile.
Down below the bridge, one starts.
And it starts. One starts right at the Elk Foundation, which I'm real familiar with. Yeah, right. Yeah. So if you want to go see that berm, I mean, we could do that. Here's some of the weeds that we missed. And of course, you realize it's very challenging. Right by this creek, you're not supposed to be applying chemicals, so that means this would have to be hand pulled, cut, sheep, something. So the closer you are to the creek, the harder it is to deal with weeds.
What do you have besides the knapweed?
Well, we have a lot of things. We have Dalmatian toad flax, we have buttercup,
canary grass.
we have tansy, we have...
Now, is it what you have? Is that hound's tongue that does that?
We have hound's tongue.
Yeah, you got some on your pants.
Yeah, well, we have that, and I'll try and clean my pants off on the road rather than here. So we have plenty of weeds, and you're all welcome to come and pull.
Have a weed day.
We have a weed pull every day, every year.
You know, when do you usually do it?
Well, we do it in the early summer.
In the early summer.
Yep. Okay. And we have the spring that takes place as well. So we're trying to use some combination of pulling and spraying, and the pulling takes place closer along the creek.
We always recommend what we call Earth Service Day, which is the Saturday after Earth Day. Okay? It's a great time to get the community out for a big weed pull or something like that. One thing I'm impressed with is the lack of trash along here.
Well, and this reflects the fact that people care about it, and I personally care about it, and I was involved in helping the homeowners association decide to close vehicular access to the natural area. It was open in the past. It's now closed by a locked gate, and the irrigator has permission to come through the gate because he has an easement. He knows the combination to get through. Anyone else that has a need to drive the road could contact me, and I would give them the combination and let them through. But generally, no one is driving here, and we have had very little trash since that gate's been put in. And earlier we were finding various pieces of trash were coming down here, and I expressed the need to have a work party at a homeowners association meeting. And before I could get the work party together, someone had come down and taken it all away. So I was very pleased. That was the most wonderful work party I've ever organized.
Do you know what flood it would take to reach those houses over there?
Well,
would it be the 50-year flood, the 100-year flood?
No.
It wouldn't even
To reach the base
a
of
1,000-year flood.
to reach the base of that high ground you're talking about, the bench,
The first houses that I see right over there.
you need to get water to them or in them.
Yeah.
This was designed, I believe, fairly intelligently. I believe, and that's why we're standing here. And maybe you could find a 100-year flood line somewhere in this bottom, but they didn't try. So I give the people who developed this subdivision a lot of credit. It's fairly dense. The lots are about a quarter acre. They're not large. We have city services, city sewer, there's city water. You can't have wood stoves. You get plowing. This is a city subdivision with rural amenities, which is only possible because the lots are small, close together, and the land that was questionable for development was just left alone. And so it is all available as natural area.
They did a big project where they actually went in and I think kind of scraped it off, put down cardboard, and then did you put soil on top of that?
Wood mulch. I mean, these riparian areas, when they're grazed for a long time or whatever, it turns into more of a grassland soil than a native riparian forest soil. So it kind of just is self-perpetuating. So you kind of have to move the soil back to something that would support shrubs instead of these grasses and weeds.
These haven't been graded for maybe 20, 25 years, but that may not do it,
It shifts into something different that can then perpetuate itself.
Yeah, it's shifted and it's just still what
it's going to stay that
into.
way.
So you can use herbicides to knock it back and then try to interseed with some native seeds.
Okay.
It'd be kind of a long-term approach.
Well, good. Anyway,
What about the cardboard?
does it do any good when I just cut it back? I went to a great deal of effort to cut back the other side. I mean, I just took clippers and cut it at the base, Yeah, and prevented it from blooming and forming new stuff.
There's so much seed out here.
Yeah, I wasted my.
But you kind of.
It feels good.
If the plant has grown up and then you cut it down and it grows up and you cut it down,
you make it wished I wasn't doing that.
The roots.
Yeah.
You're using up all of the energy stored in the roots.
If you got a lot of patience.
I was going to say if you could hang in there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway. Now there used to be a little bridge here. Let's see what we got. Now there's still a little bridge here. I don't know where this will pass a 1,000-year flood, but it probably doesn't matter. Now here's a real wetland, guys. You want to see a real wetland, and it's artificial. I think it's probably because of this berm, but boy, it's a real wetland. And see, I don't know what that stake means. Who knows?
Well, this berm, I think, was put in the 1970s also.
I heard it was put in by a jerk the day before the law passed to prevent this sort of foolishness in the bottoms. That's what I heard.
And its real problem is that it moves over here toward the creek, and then the creek is just confined between this berm and the road, and has hardly any room.
Yep. So I find this to be not a very attractive feature. Makes for a very nice hiking path.
Good knapweed.
It's great knapweed production. This has some of the highest knapweed production in the area.
Now, is this Elk Foundation property that we're on
This,
now?
as I understand it,
Yeah, I think we are now.
there's 20 acres here that the Elk Foundation ended up with. And I think they got a very favorable terms on it because, and I believe that the Washington Corp owned this at one time, and I believe it was platted for subdivision, and I believe they felt that the Elk Foundation was a good neighbor and had a place in Missoula, and they wanted to make real favorable terms for the Elk Foundation to locate here.
Yeah,
and now it is.
Kind of touch and go for a while with the Elk Foundation.
Well,
they wanted to move, and then
they're an
something didn't work out.
They're an international conservation organization, and you can make the argument they can be anywhere in the United States or Canada. And they started in Montana and they're still here. And I think this is a tremendous benefit to the community and to this neighborhood, as far as I'm concerned.
The nice cottonwood grove, though, did go just right over where that warehouse is.
Yep.
This cottonwood grove extended on through where that warehouse was.
And there's any number of deer used to, be in here.
So
You can see this is just napoli desert, napoli desert, just desert, total desert.
Does the foundation have plans for this?
Well, I'm sure they'd have to speak for themselves. But I'm confident. They actually came up to our weed pulling day and were thrilled by the stage we were at compared to what they saw when they returned to their property and realized how difficult this is because of the disturbance. The disturbance created the bed for these weeds, and it makes it very, very challenging to come along now and figure out how to address it.
Now, their property abuts the subdivision, understand?
It does. Well, it could be landscaped very differently, and there would need to be a berm if you set it up properly. I expect
Yeah,
you would have to
they
protect.
may be high enough.
You would have to protect. You would have to protect their property through your landscaping.
Yeah, so but they were saying if we need a berm, we don't know if we even need one at all.
Sure.
But it can rim our buildings.
Yep.
What we came up with for a 100-year flood flow, by the time it gets down into the lower reach, is really around close to 900 CFS. And that's been validated by the Corps. So the flows are a lot higher than what they actually thought.
So every 100 years, you would expect to see 1 year in which the flow would be 900 CFS.
That's correct. I think there's been occasions where you'll see that flow 2 years in a row, but
Right. I'm just
probability.
Probability, yep.
Yeah, it's 1/100th every year, the chance that you'll see it.
So, the question came up, where would the flood flows end up being in relationship to this subdivision? And it would be an awfully long ways away if it were only the 100-year event. Because really the channel that you saw could pretty much handle that. There's a fairly steep gradient coming in out of the mountains here.
This culvert thing makes me wonder how a whole creek can suck through that culvert.
It was actually a little bit undersized. In there, with the hydraulics, there is a backwater that would occur at about a 100-year event, but it doesn't get high enough to really become any kind of a problem.
Well, what happens
What's the
when
diameter of
big
the pipe?
logs get hung up crossways in the mountains?
That's actually a really big problem for them because this is such a long box culvert, and they placed boulders in it when they built it to enhance, I guess, the fish passage, and it's a huge maintenance problem. And in fact, there is quite a bit of debris that's actually lodged in there right now.
So that culvert back there is the last time the water sees light until past the light down here, right?
Yep, and behind
How long is this distance here?
I think it's probably 300 or 400 feet. Or no, it's more than that. It's because the interstate's probably about 120. Well, it's probably 400 or 500 feet.
So how do you maintain anything that's under here? Do you have to dig a hole in the pavement and start dealing with it, or do you send a robot down?
Well, you'd send people down. To be honest with you, it hasn't been maintained.
How big diameter is the pipe that goes under?
It's an open bottom box culvert that's about a 9 by 12 feet wide.
Well, so open bottom means there's standard stream gravel on the bottom?
Yes.
Oh, okay, so that would allow fish passage, for instance.
It's and it does. They thought I think the thinking has been that the dark tunnel type thing was real problematic for the fish, but in talking with Lad Notech from it's obviously not ideal, but that isn't the biggest problem that they see. We'll show you a couple of the other bigger problems.
The stream as it leaves the mountains, it's actually actually on top of an alluvial fountain that has formed over the years. So all the way from here almost to the river, there's deposited material that's come out of Grant Creek, and it tends to be the large cobbly material that as the valley slope
let's
gets
take
gentler,
Shram.
it
That would be
can't
good.
carry the cobbles and larger pieces
Oh my
anymore.
gosh, every time you come out here, things are just popping up like mushrooms.
So it's full, they're gonna keep coming on it.
Historically, this upper end has been a lot of gravel mining, and obviously the reason being, once you go just past those
The parking lot
barriers.
we always used to park in to look at the creek. It's all getting built up.
I usually park just right behind these barriers over here. Of course, I don't know if this van will fit, but there we go.
Gravel pit,
There's water right
What is this thing?
Marriott Hotel.
I can't. How do we possibly need this many?
Can you believe it?
Oh, this has been dry.
Yeah.
Because see, the creek really never goes dry where we live.
And it becomes a pretty significant losing reach just past the interstate.
So
Yeah.
it just keeps going down into the
Yeah.
aquifer, and
It's usually the fall that I come here on field trips, and probably by July it stops flowing.
Yeah.
okay,
Probably.
wow, I'll be darned. And see, we have it year-round. That's a year-round, that flows
It
year-round
comes down
above.
here and it hits all this cobbles
yeah.
and
Well,
stuff.
you can see the material here. It's all very gravelly material, but it's actually deposited over the years as the stream has meandered back and forth in this fan, building this fan. And now there's so much gravel and cobble here that the water just disappears into it. So it's what you call a losing stream from the edge of the mountains all the way on out. Generally the water flow decreases as you go downstream. And so when you get to July or so, you'll find that the water is no longer available, well, not right at the Clark Fork, but a little bit up from there around the subdivision we'll show you later, to where I think it actually dries up first.
Right.
And then it kind of moves back upstream, that point where the water ceases to flow as this more and more water goes in and the flows decrease coming out of the mountains. I don't think we have anything in particular to show here. This is kind of a weird bridge structure, but we're not going to try to do anything with it. But there are a couple of places further down where we do have problems that are affecting fish passage and the stability of the creek, and we'll show you those.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot planned here. The recommendations have been to try and, not damage any more that's left, and maybe we can kind of hop over the barrier here and see what they're trying to do is at least lay some of these slopes back a little bit in this area to get it a little closer to more of a natural channel cross section, but
Solid weeds.
it's just a mess. Yeah.
I don't know if Dan, did you explain that no construction is started yet on this project that
No.
we're actually looking at? It's a project that's in the works, in the planning stages. We're essentially complete with the design stage, but it still needs funding to go to construction. And it consists of a number of different problems, and I think they generally get bigger as we go downstream, as you'll see. So there isn't much to show here, but we'll start seeing things at the next couple stops.
Yeah, in comparison to down below, a lot of the stuff you see here, the problems here are relatively minor.
They could be resolved.
What we've got planned, that's pretty much kind of laid out on this. We kind of start from the bottom and work our way up with this plan set. What's planned here is estimated to be anywhere from around $4 to $5 million, and it's going to barely scratch the surface, I think, in terms of any kind of a renaturalization of the lower reach of Grant Creek.
Now, a lot of the impetus for it is flood control.
It is, and that's
Flood
the main.
control while trying not to turn it into more of a ditch. Right?
Exactly.
Flood control while trying to renaturalize it.
I think the whole idea with you know, trying to attack the flood control was to do it more naturally, primarily because the county didn't want to create a larger maintenance headache, much like what we have here, with structures and you know, more of an engineered solution. The whole thinking was to try and get it back more natural, and that way it would just be a lot easier to maintain. I guess in doing that, you know, there's probably a lot further they can go, but with that would end up being a lot more cost. So the idea is to get as much of the right-of-way to be able to establish a riparian corridor and get as much done as they can, and then hopefully the rest can happen as, you know, as time goes on.
So you're making sure you have enough right-of-way that the creek is allowed to wander. Is that
Try and get as much as possible. There's no plan for any additional right-of-way up here in this area. Bill will be showing you some stuff down below that will happen. What we call this kind of the upper reach of our planning area. It pretty much, a lot of our activities start just over the barriers here and on down below.
If people are willing to take your lives in your hands, you can see us.
There is a start. You'll see over here across the barrier. It's still pretty awful, but it.
Is there any reveg plan?
There is a revegetation plan that's been put together on this, and the plan is to go ahead and pull the banks back and replant.
So it'll look more like this on the other side instead of a...
Eventually, I think I don't think there's any plans with this, but you know, the recommendations are to try and, you know, push development back as much as possible. I've never seen the final plan. That's not part. They pushed them back as far as they possibly could.
In terms of the footprint of the building?
Right.
So if the creek takes a few feet, they don't have to get worried right away.
Right. Hydraulically, there's really no issue up here at all. I mean, it stays within these banks without any problem at all.
This is high flow, although it's high flow in a low flow year.
Yeah.
Well, I would say high flow is probably going to come a little later.
Yeah, and typically June.
What would you say, 2 or 3 times that flow?
Oh, at least.
Yeah. I'd say probably more like 5.
I can hear Grant Creek from my house at night when it's really cooking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can assure you now, it's not cooking.
It would be pretty close to bank full on a 100-year event, don't you think, Bill? I mean, if I remember right, it's right up there.
What we'll get this year, you know, maybe the 1 or 2 year event's going to be
a couple feet.
still be a couple hundred CFS, so.
What's your estimate of CFS right now? What would this be?
No, I'm thinking it's probably 10.
It's about a 10.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I think we're probably even right now seeing quite a bit of significant loss that's going on. You'll probably notice it when we get down to Broadway that I'd be willing to bet it's probably a little more of a trickle down there. Don't you think, Bill?
Oh, yeah, I imagine it's still soaking in. There's some interesting changes, though, as you go. Of course, you're losing water all the way, but the other thing that's happening is your slope is flattening out as you go. And so we have lots of velocity here. It's easy to carry the water. When we get down below, it's really hard to transport that water that last couple miles to the river.
And that's where the flooding comes.
And that's where the flooding's the issue, yeah.
I guess the history that we got in looking into this is that a lot of this was all the gravel mining, and I'm not sure who Washington purchased a lot of this property from, but they would actually pull the material out by gradation almost. You know, the larger stuff falling out up above here, and then as you go down further, more sand materials down below. So I think the gravel operation has been going in this area for quite some time. I think we should go down to just behind Carl Tyler, don't you, Bill? And then we can show them that irrigation diversion.
Mm-hmm.
There's still a fairly sizable gradient with the channel up here.
Engineered drop up ahead.
Yeah, we're gonna go look at it here. We'll show you. Yeah, this is the one of the first structures that's a fish problem. It's not a huge one, but it is a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a diversion, actually. See, goes into a diversion canal. It goes into a pipe that becomes an irrigation canal.
There's actually photos that exist showing fish trying to actually maneuver this drop-off here. During the high flow events, it's not a problem. I mean, there's enough water here. But
yeah, this is actually a structure that was built for an irrigation diversion. The pipe's right here under this head gate, and it's no longer used. So we're going to, as part of our project, if it's funded and when it's funded, is remove this structure here because it's obviously a fish passage problem, as well as an aesthetic problem perhaps. And then just rebuild the banks. We aren't going to go to a lot of work on the banks here, basically re-rock them and just plant them and keep it pretty simple. We will remove some of the material on the up gradient side here to get a continuous gradient on the stream through this reach, though, because this has choked up a lot of cobbles and boulders over time. So that's really the first thing we're going to address on the stream in terms of going from upstream to downstream. One of the actually smaller items, though.
this irrigation turnout, the water right still exists, but where this flow went was over in the area of where all the Pleasant View homes are now. So obviously it can't even be used anymore. So not going to be a big problem to hammer this thing out.
You're going to replace this structure with any grade control structures?
No, the plan will be is to allow, whatever material there'll be some material cleaned out of here, as Bill said. The rest of it, we're just going to allow it to move its way on down.
Okay.
Well, we'll have enough large rock and cobble to work with as we clean out this upper part that I don't see any stability problems. This tends to be from here on down in a grading stream, and we're really not worried about down cutting.
You're not worried about head cutting it?
No.
Well, we'll straighten out the grade, so it shouldn't do that either. Yeah.
Now, is this removed on the basis of flood control or fish?
It's not flood control, it'd be just fish enhancement.
Yes, most definitely fish.
Mm-hmm. No flood control component here.
Fish, Wildlife, and Parks they've done a number of shocking studies up through here, and the fish make it past here, definitely, but this is a fairly big problem.
Yeah, last fall I was down here, and this is literally where the stream ended, right here in this pool below the spillway, and there's some fish in there, and they couldn't go up, and that water was going to dry up on them. They were goners.
Well, Dad, you probably come out with a bucket and save them.
Yeah, they probably should have. Originally, the stream went pretty much straight for the Clark Fork River, and it's been put into a new artificial channel some time ago. I don't know, you don't know any of the history of that really, do you, Dan?
What's that now?
When they diverted the stream away from the ranch, from the ranch operation, and put it under Broadway. Built the new channel behind the Pepsi and all that, and Horseshoe Bend.
Well, actually, where it turns and goes along Broadway on the east or northeast side of Broadway that goes back to when they built the railroad. And I've seen some old GLO maps from the turn of the century that showed that kind of that turn there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So it actually
So-
was probably the railroad that,
Yeah, I
Did
think
the
the
initial
railroad had
diversion.
some of the initial.
yeah, that makes sense because it does stay on the north side of the railroad and then
Yeah.
goes under the railroad. Anyway, it's in an artificial channel from there most of the rest of the way to the Clark Fork River, and we really don't have access to the original channel anymore because of subdivisions and ranching. So we're going to have to do the best we can to try to make a better channel out of the existing channel. It shows on this map, you can see this area we call Horseshoe Bend, which has been hatched out. We're going to eliminate that and build a more direct channel through that area and take advantage of a little better slope and have a better hydraulic function. Yeah, that's part of it.
And to try and restore the channel, get more of a natural.
actually be able to build a channel. You'll see this Horseshoe Bend channel. It's just a ditch, and a pretty ugly one at that. Very steep banks. It's erodes, puts a lot of sediment into the stream. We plan to reconstruct a more natural channel, wider bottom, with banks a few feet high, and then a overbank floodplain area. It's not going to be as wide as we'd like it to be. We're restricted by our the right-of-way we were able to obtain, but it will at least begin to function as a normal channel would, with a flood area and an area for riparian vegetation.
We're going to take you up to one of the real biggies for fish passage problem. Probably the biggest constriction that exists up in this area.
So where the stream is now, well, we're not quite to it yet, but it's on the far side of these tracks. You can see where the cottonwoods are coming over there. It's following to the west along the north side of the tracks, then it'll cross under the tracks and be between the tracks and the highway. And there's a few problems in there with some steep banks that we'll take care of. There's a culvert in here that needs to come out, actually a pair of culverts behind the Pepsi plant here, just off to the right here, and then it's going to make a turn and come under right here.
Right here, and we're going to go past it.
Yeah, we'll come back.
But you can see the channel right there. We can actually, this road that I'm going to turn around
That's a
on,
tremendous sediment problem there. That's
right
that horseshoe
beside-
bend I was describing.
Yep.
so we might
And it's just running
Go
right
up there a
along
little
here.
bit.
And obviously the rancher was trying to get it out of his way so he could irrigate better. But now that it's in the future, the land use is going to be subdivision anyway. It's Dan and the county have been working with the landowner to try to work out a different alignment for the stream, and it looks like that's going to be a component of this.
Yeah, you may,
Isn't that ugly?
Just take a look at the flows. I mean, you're going to see that it's, you know, we've lost quite a bit of water, you know, from where we were at up above. We call this whole area in here the Horseshoe Bend portion of the project, and the game plan is the stream was pushed over. I think it was in the late 50s by a bulldozer. To where it's at right now. You can see it's heavily incised. If you see the fence line and the wheel lines that are out there right now, that's where the new channel alignment will be. The plan is to have as wide as we can obtain for a riparian corridor with a very wide channel in this area, and actually designed to drop out a lot of the material that comes out of the mountains in this upper area here. A lot of this channel will be excavated out, and then stream bank material will be placed in there. There's quite a bit of silting problems that have happened downstream in the subdivision that created the flooding, and you know, all the material's coming from this upper reach here. This whole Horseshoe Bend again will come out, and it'll be a little bit more of a straight with some sinuosity in the thalweg itself coming down through.
There won't be a lot of sinuosity though, because as soon as we get across Broadway, grades really start to flatten out pretty quickly, and we just don't. have enough gradient to introduce much sinuosity. It's probably got to be a fairly straight stream. We're going to put in some small meanders for aesthetics, but it probably have a sinuosity of 1.1 or so. And we just don't have the gradient that we would like to have to make a more natural channel.
The FEMA flood firm maps actually show the 100-year or the channel way over there cutting through the Pleasant View Home subdivision.
You want to talk about the culvert? That's
Sure.
more your bag. Well, you can see how the flow has just about disappeared already in that, what would you say, Dan, maybe 3/4 of a mile from the last place we were at?
Right. At most.
Oh yeah, not even that. Yeah.
There was a considerable amount of work that was done here probably about 8 or 9 months ago. A sanitary sewer line now comes up through this whole Mullen area along that roadway that you see, and it's going to eventually head on out to the Y out towards Kalispell. So you're going to see a lot of development, unfortunately, is going to occur out there. These culverts here are far undersized for the 100-year event, and in fact, before the sewer line came through here, the ends of these culverts were falling off, and the channel was incised quite a bit, and it was a sizable fish barrier. It still is because of the velocities coming out of these culverts.
So are they undersized primarily because of velocities or because of the ability to get the water through?
Both.
Okay.
Both. The plan is to actually replace these culverts with a 16-foot wide open bottom box culvert. Gives the ability to have more of a natural stream bed for at least the bottom.
Okay. So they'll have to dig up the highway.
Yeah. So this is one of the larger parts of the project, is to actually put in the box culvert across Broadway, and then from that point it'll be a wide excavated channel about 40 feet wide, and then with another this is probably about 20, 25 maybe. But it will also have a floodplain terrace that will go out at least 150 feet wide all the way across, pretty much in a straight shot all the way towards where the cattle are over there. And the county's doing whatever they can to try and acquire as much of a riparian corridor through here as possible. They're still in discussions with the landowner, but it's been going pretty well. He has plans for a kind of industrial subdivision just right over here, and as a result of the Grant Creek project, they actually redesigned their development plan to try and accommodate what the county had planned in here for Grant Creek. So fortunately, I think they're far enough out ahead, at least for this development, to be able to kind of cooperate with the landowner. And if all goes well, the right-of-way will be in place here fairly soon also for this entire piece through what we call the Horseshoe Bend. The channel's pretty much like this. I mean, it's heavily incised all the way on down, pretty much all the way through the ranch property and the property that's controlled by the airport, all the way down to the Hiawatha grade, down by the Mullen Trail subdivision, which we'll be going to next.
What's the cross section going to look like?
It varies. Up in this area, it is a fairly wide channel, probably about 40 feet wide, and then goes then it terraces out into a floodplain that's as wide as about 150 feet. When it gets down closer to the Hiawatha grade, it goes into an area we call Hiawatha Lake, where that floodplain terrace, the channel thowway is quite a bit narrower. It's maybe 18 feet wide, but it goes into a as much as 400 to 450 feet wide riparian terrace area.
Is that the way it is now, or the way?
No, that's the way it will be. Currently, right now, it looks about like this. It looks like a ditch. Some of the old county mapping showed the Grant Creek actually coming right through this Pleasant View subdivision. You can see a few, you'll see a few trees over here just north of the school. That was actually at one time one of the Grant Creek channels.
I remember before any of these houses were here.
Yeah. It's a different place now, isn't it? God, these houses have gone up quick. It's going to develop fast in here.
You'd like to do it just with flood storage in other places, and we just didn't have enough flexibility for creating either new ponds upstream because of the airport expansions, or because we couldn't acquire enough right away. So the only thing to do is to get the water out of this area with this bypass pipe. And maybe you can tell them a bit of the history of what happened here at Mullen Trails.
First, we should explain why airports object to ponds.
Oh yeah, waterfowl in the way, breeding ground, and they can get sucked into jet engines and cause problems apparently.
The Mullen Trail Estate subdivision, currently right now about 2/3 of it is within the 100-year floodplain. 2/3 of this subdivision, yes. In 1997 there was a fairly sizable event. It was probably about a 10-year event, and they flooded about 1/3 of the subdivision. So that's a big part of why we've been doing what we've been doing is to try and resolve that problem.
And believe it or not, Grant Creek's right ahead of us. Well, there's probably not much. I don't know if
we'll be fine. No, we'll be fine. I think they'd prefer us not to drive out. So.
See, there's Grant Creek.
Yeah.
Resurfaces.
Shall we go over to the bank?
Yeah. Show them what we got here.
Pretty amazing down here. When you look at all this, you can see why when Vicki said, "Well, you need to move that flood berm back." Well, yeah, I agree with her, but boy, it's a lower priority than some other things down here that are just hammered so bad. Yeah. This is Grant Creek.
Wow.
Isn't this a bummer?
Now, why is this here? Why did somebody go to this?
The sanitary sewer comes across here. The sanitary sewer is right along the edge of this subdivision. And this subdivision, in about another month, rather than discharging into a their drain field, will actually be going into the sanitary sewer.
They're going to be on the sewer.
It's just a poor ditch, really, all the way through here. If you look over, you can see the truck driving on that's the old Hiawatha Railroad grade. And just up gradient from that, we would like to have been able to take you out on that road. We just didn't get the permission from the landowner. Above that railroad grade is the area we call the Hiawatha Lake. And that railroad grade helps hydraulically to kind of pool up the peak flows. And the whole plan of ours is to allow that to still occur. It helps us hydraulically down here. So the plan is to have a very wide riparian area up there that, like I think I mentioned before, it's around 450 feet wide, with a very wide floodplain terrace and kind of a wide spot there that we're just going to actually store the flood flow. And then meter it through the railroad grade. And everything out in here, this whole channel, this dog leg and everything will all go away, and the channel will be moved out more into the center of this common area. And the whole idea is to try and get a little bit more of a natural channel cross section. The channel section in here will end up being still a fairly narrow thalweg, around 18 feet wide, and shallow, but it'll have about a 200 to 250 foot wide floodplain terrace.
So we'll be getting rid of this berm, at least
Yes.
up in this area.
From about right over, well, where that metal stake is there, on up and around, this berm will go away.
And there'll be a floodplain in its place.
Yes. To do that, though, and make the hydraulics work to where we could keep the water surface down low enough, so we had to go to an unnatural solution. So the plan is to actually put in what's called a peak flow bypass structure. When we go around the corner here, just past this, what we call the narrows here, we'll go back into another wide floodplain again. And there will be a structure there that will kind of be off to the side, right by Mullen Road, that will be in the dry most of the time. And this channel will be able to flow at least up to about 300 CFS before that structure would ever kick in and actually peel the peak flows off. But that structure will actually pull anything above about 300 CFS and actually put it in a pipeline. It's actually three very large pipelines that will go and actually discharge the peak flow out into the Clark Fork River floodplain. So it'll never be actually introduced back into the Grant Creek channel. It eventually gets back to Grant Creek, but it will go underneath the channel as it is now. The county has another about 1 million in match that's identified right now. So they get about 4 million. They get about what we've showed you accomplished. You know, like I said, not a lot of a real elaborate planting or anything, but get a lot of the earth moving and some restoration completed. We get the crossing at Broadway and then this peak flow bypass structure down here. If it had to be broken up into pieces, the highest priority probably would end up being this location. They've got the flooding problems here and the greatest amount of liability. And this whole area, this whole 200 to 250 foot wide floodplain would all become a lake. And up above the Hiawatha grade, it would end up being about a 400 to 500 foot wide lake.
You know, one of the interesting things about the hydrology of this stream and streams in this area is that peak flow tends to be really broad. It goes for like weeks when it's high. And so our ability to store that is really limited. If it was more like I'm from over in Helena, the streams go up and then they come back down. That sort of peak you can really chop off with a floodplain. These ones, you can have that, build all the floodplain you want and get it all flooded. There's still more water coming out of the hills, out of that snow melt, and you're not going to be able to store it all. So we really can't take that much off the peak with all the flood storage we build into this, and that's why we are stuck with doing this peak flow bypass in the end.
Right now the plan is to get that 100-year floodplain back to this side of the houses. Unfortunately, I think there were some locals here that voiced some fairly sizable opposition to this, saying, look, I hunted ducks out here, but it went in anyway. And I don't know, that happened really before my time here, so.
The history on that either, but yeah, somebody wasn't looking out for the public good there.
Thank you guys.
This is the end, yeah.
Can't quite take you to the Clark Fork.